All right, let's bring in my panel now. Joining me, National Affairs Editor at the Daily Telegraph, Sky News host James Morrow, and Sky contributor Jamie Rogers. Thank you to you both. Let's just move to those harrowing scenes today at the funeral for Rabbi Eli Schlanger. Very moving, very tragic. I tell you what, James, is nothing worse than a grown man crying, but that's what we've heard and saw today. Notably, though, no senior Labor MPs, and there's a raft of them that live in Sydney, including the Prime Minister, were there at the service. We saw senior coalition MPs. Of course, the Premier there, Chris Minns, was there, members of the New South Wales opposition as well. I think that's a dereliction of the Prime Minister's duty. I think particularly given Rabbi Schlanger was such a senior member of the Jewish community in Sydney, the Prime Minister should have been there.
And, you know, Peter, it is a disgrace. And the Prime Minister's evasions on this topic, I think, speak for themselves. He was asked, why weren't you there? And he said, oh, well, you know, I wasn't invited. Well, you know, we know how this works. The Prime Minister's staff could have contacted the family and said, look, you know, we're terribly sorry for your loss, and the Prime Minister would be honoured to attend. This is something that obviously Chris Minns did, Susan Ley did, other politicians did. Remember, Peter, that when in 2022 Anthony Albanese ran for Prime Minister against Scott Morrison, he promised to be the Prime Minister who showed up, right? He said he would be the one who was present at the difficult times, and he would show up and he would be on the scene. He is right now running scared, and he's running scared because he doesn't have the chutzpah, if I may use that word here, to front up to a community that is grieving, that is angry, and that blames him and his ministers for spending 2.5 years dawdling and taking very little action about a crisis they had been warned about explicitly time and time again.
He also very cannily, you know, and I think I say this as a cynical device, Jamie. He's gone to the hospitals, he's gone and visited others, he's been involved in this event overnight with the Governor-General at Admiralty House. It is a Jewish event, but it saved him from fronting Jewish communities elsewhere and getting booed. So precious is his ego, he can't front the people he has let down in this horrific, tragic way because he's so thin-skinned, he cannot take any public criticism.
You're right, Peter, and that's the problem. He can't take any form of criticism, which is why he's not showing up now for the Jewish communities. They so desperately need leadership and for someone to have their back. And he hasn't returned to Bondi since Monday morning when he first went there. We've had the funeral today, as you've already mentioned, where he was a no-show. Matilda's funeral is tomorrow. And Peter, he better be there. This is that 10-year-old girl who lost her life when she was at the petting zoo at Bondi Beach. The Albanese government has catastrophically failed the Jewish community, but also Australians. They have been crying out for leadership, and the fact that he is now nowhere to be seen, but he's having photos with, don't get me wrong, Ahmed Al-Ahmed deserves to have the praise and for the Prime Minister to go and say thank you to him for saving countless lives. But the Jewish families who have also lost members within their community also deserve that same respect. And yes, he probably will be booed, but I tell you what, people will appreciate the fact that he's there and showing that words are not just words. Actions speak louder than words, Peter. He needs to stand up. His job is to protect all of Australia. If he can't do that, if he can't make Australians safe, he needs to stand down. If he doesn't want to go and stand at these funerals, stand down and put someone else in the role who will do it.
There's a time in politics you've got to take the medicine, and if you can't take the medicine, you need to get out of the parliament. The New South Wales Premier is recalling the parliament. He wants urgent gun laws passed. He also wants change to the way that protests are run in his state. Now, I'm all for both of these things, but they can't be a distraction away from what motivated the alleged gunman. We'll be very carefully legally. I'm not going to give him any way to wriggle out of this. The alleged gunman and the dead father. There's got to be more focus on the drivers behind all of this, of course, James. But good on Chris Minns for bringing the parliament together. Frankly, I think that's what should happen in Canberra. I think there needs to be a show of solidarity in the federal parliament and a message sent around the world that this is a red line now that Australia has crossed, and we will not take it lying down.
Look, I agree with you, Peter, about coming together as a parliament, but I start to get a little nervous sometimes about what Chris Minns is talking about, because I listened to his press conference today, and he was saying essentially, we have to protect our multicultural society. But then what he kept talking about is more and more rules on free speech and gatherings and so on to ensure that this multicultural society doesn't tear itself apart. And to me, that says, maybe there's a problem with this whole idea. And I worry that in all the talk, particularly around gun laws, but also, some of these other things they're talking about, that all of this becomes a distraction and we don't have the crucial conversations we need to have around the motivators of this alleged gunman. We don't have the conversations broadly about culture, about the politics of all of this, because people say, well, it's not the time. But if now is not the time to do this, Peter, I don't know when it is. So, yeah, I'll give him credit for bringing everybody together.
Both, James.
But I think we can, but we do need to have those conversations. We can't let some, in Labor say, don't do those other conversations.
No, I agree with the conversation and I agree it should be a robust treatment of the legislation. It should not be waved through. But I'm a conservative. I'm not a libertarian. So I do accept there are constraints on free speech. And I think we are, unfortunately, in this country, looking to constrain all the wrong people, but we have no constraints on the bad people, right?
I agree.
All of the stuff coming out of the mosques, and we'll get to that in a moment with Mike Pozzulu, that must be shut down. And let's see if that is also part of the legal strengthening. It doesn't look like, Jamie, from comments made by Chris Minns, 3 police apparently on duty on Sunday, even though it was the first day of a very significant Jewish festival in a very significant Jewish area. It doesn't sound like there was sufficient resourcing, and I suspect this is also where the attention will move.
Yes, absolutely, Peter. And Mal Lanyon was asked about that in a press conference today, and he said it was part of the investigation to see why there were such short resources from the police side of things. But also when you look at the fact that they were just outgunned as well, having those hand pistols up against those long-range rifles, they just didn't stand a chance against that sort of an arsenal. And to think that there was that Jewish event on a beach with 1,000 there, and to have 3 police officers just seems very inadequate at a time when anti-Semitism is such on a rise, and we have seen things like the fire bombings of synagogues and childcare centres, that you would think that they would have had more presence. I don't want to say anything bad about the police. I think they've done a fantastic job to try and defend what they could, and we heard that terrible story that one of those police officers has now lost the sight in one of his eyes. But I think that they were incredibly under-resourced, and unfortunately those 1,000 Jews that were on the beach were sitting ducks in this incident on Sunday.
Let's go to some comments made by Laura Tingle. She's a very high-profile ABC journalist. These are remarks she made on a podcast yesterday while speaking with Patricia Karvelis.
Absolutely radicalised, these were. They were targeting Jews. It is anti-Semitic, but we are ascribing all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, their actions are not based on their religion.
I find that absolutely reprehensible.
It's just, I heard that earlier today too, and I was absolutely shocked. I mean, for one thing, of course, the police haven't made any announcements about the alleged gunman's motives to begin with. So we don't even start from a position where she can say that categorically one way or the other. But what we do know about this sort of crime is, you're talking about allegations of ISIS flags, you're talking about all sorts of other things, allegations of training in the Philippines, all of these sorts of things. They point to something that is very different. And we know that anti-Semitism often has a deeply religiously motivated consequence. And this is what I was talking about before, having these conversations and not shying away from them. What she's doing there is she's running for cover. She's running cover from an agenda and a narrative that she, and I think a lot of the left, find deeply, deeply uncomfortable.